Okay, everybody. So for today's class, we're going to kind of discuss some new techniques and tricks. As I just told those individuals who are here voluntarily for the session today, I'm going to use my iPad because I feel like we got a lot to cover, and I don't want to find myself struggling like last class with problems with the camera and the mirroring and all that stuff. Also, by using my iPad today, I'll be able to change colors quite a bit when I do different types of dissections for what we're going to be doing. And I think that can help clarify what I'm doing for you as you learn along. Later on in the class, I'll switch to paper and pen so that you can see a bit more of the same type of material approach when you are working on your homework. So the first thing I want us to do, and just in case, because I talked to a student earlier today, you shouldn't be using your pastel paper for anything yet. All these class notes you can do on printer paper, or if you have like an old sketchbook, you can do it in there. Some of you took design with me, so you have your dotted pad that you used in design class. This doesn't have to be on paper that is special, basically, is what I'm saying. Okay, so today we're going to start off by talking about ovals and drawing ovals in perspective. And so the first thing to kind of think about is this idea of planar rotation. So I'm just going to turn off my rotation here on my preferences so it doesn't rotate on me all the time. And then it just rotated on me. So planar rotation is when it's not no apparently I need that on. Sorry, never mind. I thought I could have it horizontal, apparently not. So planar rotation is basically a form of gradation. So if you took design with me, planar rotation is basically a form of gradation. Rotation equals gradation. Okay, so I think I might have said this already, but just in case I didn't. So if we have like a coin, right? Like, and we're say we're watching a cartoon, Batman cartoon, and two faces in the cartoon, and we have a coin, and it has a head on it. It's got a scar, you know, whatever. And Two-Face flips that coin in the air. As that coin spins, we start to see different parts of the coin. And at some point, the coin becomes completely flat before it turns over to reveal itself going the other way. Okay. And so planar rotation basically is a gradation that allows us to see different planes as a form changes its position to us. So we have a square. The square starts to lay down. And eventually just becomes a line. So when we're talking about drawing ovals, you know, what we're really talking about is like, you know, drawing a circle, you know, or drawing an ellipse, whichever way, you know, either we're drawing ellipses or ovals. It's, you know, a similar type of thing. So drawing a circle straight on, you know, if we're just looking right at the circle and it's basically like, you know, very much within our eye level, then we see the circle as like this plane that's facing us. But then what happens, you know, is that the circle then starts to spin and turn, and then we get the planar rotation. So when we draw ellipses in space, we're thinking about this notion of the gradation that occurs as the object's relationship to us shifts and changes. Now, one of the things that I think is really fascinating about perspective is that in order to understand perspective, you have to be willing to draw things wrong. So by that, I mean, right, like if I am looking at a table and it's a square from above, it's kind of squarish. To draw that square table in perspective, I have to draw exactly what it's not. It is not a trapezoid, it's a square. But yet to draw it in perspective, I have to draw it incorrectly. And I think that's really fascinating. And, I've been teaching quite a long time. And one of the things that I have seen a number of times, I think, in terms of like being a teacher and trying to understand how students are hearing things and applying things and adapting ideas, this one is one of the things which makes me, as an instructor, I find completely fascinating and completely understandable, which is that if I tell a lot of students to draw a square table with 4 legs, they will draw this. Sometimes they even put a leg down here because their brain's starting to be like, oh, sometimes I see a leg that like I can't see. Which big, this kind of looks like a dancing person. Sorry, a ballet dancer. So what they've done, right, like conceptually isn't wrong. They know that there's a square table. They know that there's 4 legs. And so they put this together. Now, what's more interesting to me, like this would be like if I just told you to draw it without showing it to you. What's more interesting to me is when I put a table physically in front of a student and they draw the table. And this isn't perfect, I'm afraid. But they draw the table top, for instance, like perfectly fine in perspective. Then they draw the legs that they can see perfectly fine. They can see it, they understand it, they know where it's supposed to go. Really no problem. But then I actually will see students say, well, I can't really see all of the back leg. And they will then move the leg here. And over here, they will move that the back leg here, they'll put it over here. And again, they're not doing, their brain is trying to solve the problem. And it's not an illogical solution. But what the brain isn't kind of getting is that in order to draw this visually like what they see, it has to draw it completely wrong. And that's why it took so many sort of like, failures within art history in the West to draw perspective, because like there's a lot of interpretation that has to take place in order to draw, in order to draw this, you have to be able to interpret space, and that's difficult. So then when we're looking at ovals and cylinders in perspective, seemingly things feel like they're just going to be like super difficult. Okay. But once you understand the basic principles, it, obviously gets a lot easier. Okay. So let's go ahead and just start off by drawing a boundary box. And this can be sketchy. It doesn't have to be perfect right now. Okay. Once you've drawn your boundary box, let's use the tools that we've been utilizing and find the center. Create that Union Jack. Or, you know, Luke Skywalker's tracking device for attacking the Death Star in episode 7, A New Hope. Is it episode 7, episode 5, episode 4, episode 4, episode 4. Movie came out the year I was born. Was watching like some TikTok, and this lady was reacting to a young TikToker's TikTok about if you were born in the 1900s. And the lady was like, you know, super shocked, but it's not incorrect. I was born in the 1900s. This sounds super weird. Okay. So there's our center, right? Like we found the center horizontally and vertically. Let's be sassy today. Let's be a little bit sassy. Let's divide this space over here again. And let's find the center there. Okay, now take your eraser and kind of erase that down so it's nice and light if you weren't drawing lightly. What I'm going to do is just create another layer, and I'm going to just lighten this so it doesn't get super confusing for us. But if you've got your pencil and your eraser, just go ahead and kind of erase. And now if you're at home and you're following along and you want to do this digitally, you can do this digitally too. I'm not opposed to that. You know, I've already had some students turn in digital notes, and you know, your class notes are your class notes. And so unless I tell you it has to be paper and pencil, it can be digital. You know, I'm okay with that. So what we're going to do now is like, we're going to use that new division of space. Let's use that new division of space there to establish that that's going to be our vanishing point. Okay. Now, I'm just going to jump back onto this layer just because it helps me to I can keep things nice and clean for you all. I'm going to now just draw a horizontal line. I'm going to use this point here where those two lines are intersecting, and I'm just going to draw apparently an invisible line there. I'm just going to draw a horizontal line there. Here. Now, the reason I picked that point was because basically if I did all the work, I would find that that point is halfway, you know, up and down that space over there. And if you've erased it and you can't see it, no sweat, because we're just going to use that to help us to put a square on the other side. Okay. So again, no sweat. So try to draw lightly. Again, if if you're having a hard time drawing lightly, a couple things can help. Sharpening your pencil so it has a nice point to it. The other thing that you can do is and make sure you're using your HB. I think that's the lightest pencil you have. And the other thing you can do is moving back on the pencil so you're not holding so close to the tip. Those are all tricks. So now what I'm going to do is just draw a horizontal line, and I'm just going to draw it from that point to that point. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to pick up a line from my vanishing point to that corner and pick up a line from my vanishing point to that corner like that. Now we're making as close to a square as we can. So we don't want the length of our, the length of our square to be like this, because that would be a rectangle, and that's going to give us a really distorted oval. So we're going to look at this distance. And remember that as we learn to draw, we are also learning to develop our ability to look at and see and judge what we perceive. Okay, so I'm looking at that distance and I'm going to say, okay, so this is diminishing in space, this direction. This is this length. Now, is there a certain way to do this? Yes, but we're not going to do it that way because I want you to develop your skills. What is going to give me a back edge that will feel like I have a square? So what I'm thinking about here, and that's such an annoying thing for me to do as a teacher, and I'm so sorry, but I'm going to do it. I want you to trust your feelings. Okay, what does this length feel like? And what does that length feel like if you think about its diminishment in length because of the perspective? Don't forget that if you just took this line here and you use the same line there, the same length, you wouldn't be making a square because this edge here is diminishing in space. Therefore, this edge here, if it's going to be a square, must be smaller than that edge there. So if you want exact, exact answers, go take algebra. I would imagine to a certain point, right? Like high-end algebra might have multiple answers, but and by the way, there is a way to get an exact answer here, but we're not going to do it. So now I have this. Isn't that annoying? I'm sorry, I'm being annoying. And so now my next step is we're going to divide this space up and find its different sort of dissectional elements to help us find the center, which we've already been doing, right? We've already been doing that. So we can go corner to corner. I'm going to shrink down the size of my line so it doesn't get too confusing for you all. And then I'm going to go to here. Right, so this line is going to go through to the vanishing point. Now this line here is just going to be a horizontal line because it's 1 point perspective, and horizontal lines always remain horizontal. Now I drew beyond the box just because it's easier for me to see that it's still horizontal. So now we have this like flat planar gradation or planar rotation Union Jack. Now this next part is really important. Okay. Circles in space are distorted. They become ellipses or ovals, whichever word you want to use. They do not come to points. A circle does not come to a point. And so just because it distorts in space does not mean that now it comes to a point. It doesn't. So what we're going to do is we are going to place a line here And that line is going to be a measurement, a certain measurement. And then take that measurement that you made. And like, what kind of measurement is that, Vaughn? It's kind of small. We're just trying to think about if I was to evenly dissect a small measurement here with this line here, the left side in this case, because the vanishing point's to the right, the left side would be smaller than the right side, which would be longer. Now, once we've done that, we can drag that to the vanishing point and drag that to the vanishing point. Now notice back here that those areas are now smaller than these areas. And that's what we want because we want it to be in perspective. Now over here, same thing. Create a measurement and then make the measurement a little bit larger in the front because it's in the front and so it's larger. And then just horizontal line. Okay. I'm looking at it and thinking, why is that wrong, Vaughn? Well, it's wrong because when I drew that line, I slightly got it askew. So that wasn't a good move. Okay. Change color so you can see. Now I'm just going to draw from here now to there, here to there, here to there, here to there. Look how distorted that looks. That's because of the relationship of this original square to the vanishing point. And then you can just divide this space here in half, 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 and half. When we do this again in a few moments, I'll show you how to do that with more exactness and you'll be able to check it rather than just guessing. But right now it's okay. We just need this point and this point. Why don't I do that? That could be really helpful, Vaughn. Why don't you do that? So that gives us this point here, this point, 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 and this point. So those are all the points that we just created. Then if you connect them, now be aware when you're drawing like an oval like this, that you're going to get a bit more accuracy if you don't try to do it all in one movement. And it's always more difficult to push down than to pull up. And so sometimes that can be a good trick to drawing a circle. Now, if you're left-handed, your right side of your circle might be better than your left. Most of us who are right-handed, our left side is generally a bit better than our right, because generally we start when we draw the circle or the oval, we tend to like draw downwards to the left and then try to push up to the right. And because we're pushing up, we're like fighting that inertia, you know, of the pencil gliding over the paper. And as a result, we end up with like this, like we have to apply more pressure. And so it's actually harder to draw the oval. A good oval is drawn with a looseness and a gliding of the tool across the space. And so then now we can go in and we can kind of like make sure that that's not coming to a point and that it feels, you know, pretty smooth. And pay attention to how like in some places it's flattening and other places it's widening. Now, if this was a cylinder and we were doing the top, then we would just replicate the same type of thing, but up in the air, which is what you're going to do by hand while I go get more coffee, because I'm using a computer, so it just does it automatically for me. So I'll check back with you in about 30 minutes. Just joking. Let's do it together. Aren't computers great though? Wouldn't it be great? Okay, so we've created now this monster of an oval. Now there's lots of different ways that we can create the oval above it. Here's something to be really, really conscious of, is that if you start going beyond, you know, generally within the perspective, we try to think about keeping things within like 60% of the space so that we don't accidentally end up with like huge distortions. So by that, I mean, like if I had an oval that I drew down here, right, and it was going back here, it's going there, right? And then I had one up here. I might start getting these really kind of like distorted ovals because their distance is so far away from the vanishing point and the horizon line that they're going to stretch and distort like in a pretty extreme way. And so often when we are trying to draw something like a cylinder, you know, we're trying to think about keeping things within, you know, what I have been taught as being about 60% of the space. Okay. So one of the things we could say right here would be like, okay, so now I have this oval. If I turn my paper on its side here, I could draw lines straight up. Now, you'd have to keep them vertical like that. And I could use that to find the locations of that. Those weren't very vertical, Vaughn. Of like the back edge. I could connect those then. And that would like kind of help me to find the back edge of the oval. Okay. And then I could draw these ones from the front. And that would help me to find the front edge. Okay, we could totally do that. And the better at this you get, the more that would be a possibility. But it's also kind of hard to do that the first time. So instead of doing that, we're going to go ahead and we're just going to build another square. So I'm going to turn this layer back on. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to use my straight tool, and y'all can do this just with your ruler and pencil. And I know I'm kind of cheating because I'm, using the digital format, but I am hoping it's making things easier that you can see me change all these colors. So from the four corners, I'm going to draw lines straight up. And I'm going to extend them beyond where I think they need to go, by the way. I'm just drawing lines straight up, and I'm not really worried yet about their length. I just want to make sure that I'm drawing them longer than I think I want them to be. And how much do you want them to be? Well, we want them to be above the horizon line, but we don't want them to be like all the way up here. Okay. So what we're going to do then is I want you to make a choice, and the choice can be yours. I'm going to look at this distance. And I'm going to say, okay, like I want to draw that distance again. I don't want to measure it. I don't want to use my ruler and my numbers because we're not practicing that right now. Though we probably need to, which is fine. I want to feel that distance. And then I want to feel it here again. And then I'm just going to go up a little bit more. I don't know why, because I want to. And if yours looks different, I'm fine with that. Just don't put it all the way up here because you're going to get mega distortion. Mega distortion. I don't know where that came from, and I apologize profusely. Now, if I was smart, I would have been drawing all of that on a different layer, but I'm not smart, so I just drew all of that on the same layer. Okay, now, once you've decided on your height, I was trying to avoid that. I'm going to go a little bit below that line because I don't want to line up by accident. I'm going to draw my horizontal line over to establish that. And then I'm going to draw this up to establish that. Okay, I'm going to pull from here down to establish that. And I'm going to pull from here over to establish that. Fun. Sorry, I accidentally erased corner there. Okay. First line wasn't very good. That line, Vaughn, wasn't very good, Vaughn. How did I ever become a professor? Look at that. What's that got to do with anything? Get that line out of there. Okay, so now we got this. Oh, I see a chat. Let's see. Absolutely, no problem at all. Okay, now what we're gonna do is earlier on, on this layer, right, our purple and blue layer there, we found the center of our square. Okay. So what we're going to do is just up here, we're going to just do the same thing, corner to corner. Okay. And then the vanishing line, create an orthogonal through the center there. And then here, we're just going to do our horizontal line. Now, if we've done this right, the center point here should go all the way through and touch that center point there. It's like a Leonardo da Vinci helicopter. Look at that. So now we have a much more exact way to transfer the points we made earlier to the top. Okay, so the points that we have on the bottom, I kind of ruined it because I kept drawing over it. So let's just recreate the points that we have on the bottom. And hopefully you can still see yours. So we have this point, this point, this point, this point. Do you see I'm drawing them there? Oh, I don't even need that layer on. This point, 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 that point, and that point. So those are the layers, those are the points I drew on the bottom. And what we're going to do is now we're just going to take straight lines, straight vertical lines right up to the top and transfer those points. Okay. So I'm going to actually use my ruler tool here. And then I'm just going to draw in the oval. Okay. Like so. Now you can actually see we're starting to get some distortion here. So I might be slightly too high here to be within that 60% of the space. So if I retrace this, I'm just going to retrace the outside up here. And then the most exterior verticals here. We can start to see our cylinder. Erase this. So we probably would have, I think that I went a bit too high up there. And that's why I have a little bit of that distortion there that I think is kind of throwing things off. But we can see that if we had like a label, for instance, like say we had a label coming here. We could then mimic that and mimic this. And we'd be starting to get like a pretty believable cylinder. Now, why do we get distortions? Like why did these things happen? Well, what's happening is the location of this left side to the vanishing point. Up here and here, it's creating more of an extreme curve because of the relationship to the vanishing point. Then this side here, which is more of like a smooth curve because of its relationship to the vanishing point. Okay. Sorry, I'm recording, FYI, everybody. I'm going to just clear all of this out and we're going to start again. Okay. So we're going to do the same process again, but let's see if we can create something which can help us to see how all those points we created on the ovals relate to the planes that we need to show the dimensionality of the cylinder form. So let's go ahead and create a new boundary box. Okay, and then let's find the center of our box. All right. So this time, let's just keep our vanishing point in the center. And let's go ahead and let's divide this space. And then let's just put that horizontal line there. Okay, and then what we're going to do is just on that line that we just drew, just go ahead and draw a horizontal line. Okay. From that line, let's draw a square. Oh. Okay. And then let's just find the center of that square. Then let's place our line on the top and on the bottom. Remember, it's going to be ever so slightly larger on the bottom because it's lower than the horizon line. Don't be too extreme with that. And then here, this side, same type of thing. Oh, I just did that backwards. Well, left side should be smaller. The right side should be larger. Okay. Now we're going to do diagonal line, diagonal line, diagonal line, diagonal line. And then again here, we're going to go halfway, 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 halfway. And that lets us put our points. And then, we could even, once we start to do like this, we could even start to say, well, what if I also had like, a vertical line here and one here, and then like, would that give me another place where I could do something like that? That would give me another point. Okay. But I think that's enough points to kind of go by when we start to do our oval. And it reminds me of connect the dots, which I don't know if many of you have ever done, but or if any of you have ever done connect the dots, I don't know. So these places, I don't need the straight line tool on. This becomes and again, you can see that I'm breaking my line up and then I'm rounding out. That's how I want you to do it. You can always then go in and clean it up. Now, it feels a bit boxy and that's okay because we actually are going to use that to our advantage today in this one. So what we want to do is you can see all the little points that we made. Okay. So we're going to take just take your ruler and starting at this point here, pardon me, draw down to the vanishing point. Okay, now you can see if I drew any of the ones basically from here to here, they would be inside. So we don't want to do those yet. So then go ahead and I want you to pick like a length. I don't mind how long you pick it to be. And then I want you to close on the outside. I want you to mimic your curve. That you have in the front. Okay. Now, inside of the front oval, I want you to practice your free hand. And come in here and I want you to assign an interior thickness. Now we could find an exact by creating another square and doing everything again, but I want you to practice your freehand and your perception abilities. The outside left side should be thinner than the right side. Okay. Now, if we look at this, I just want you now to copy the lines from the points through the thickness that you just drew. Okay. You're only going to have to do them you can do them all. You can do them all. Now, from the interior edges that you just drew, you're now going to pull back to the vanishing point for the inside planes. You notice here that we're not going to see anything there. Now, when you're ready, take your eraser and kind of like lightly erase stuff, but don't erase all of it because you need to still be able to see it. And what I want you to do is I want you to draw over that which we need to keep to show our cylinder. So again, you just saw me kind of boo-boo. It's easier to pull down than to push up with a curve. So it's okay to pick up your tool and go back to the top and pull down. And I'm totally okay with you freehanding it because I want to practice that with you. Try not to get too confused if you're starting to get confused with all the planes. Then when you get to this stage, if you notice that something's missing, then you could fix it. So like I can see that like something's not quite right up here at the top. What's gone wrong there? Well, perhaps what's gone wrong there is this. Maybe that needs to go away. I don't like how bumpy that was. And that needs to go in there, you see? Well, maybe that was the line I needed. And this was the line I didn't need. Look at that. Now, just as a reminder, anytime that you have like an oval and it's like a cup, instance, and that cup has a handle and the handle is this way. you would not have a 1-point perspective, you would really have a 2-point perspective because the handle would be going that way and that way. So the 1-point aspect of the oval is really only applicable if the cylinder is completely symmetrical. And the more you start to understand this principle, the more, it becomes easier to draw oval objects, right? Like it's bumpy in the beginning, but later on you start to just simply understand that there are relationships between the curvatures at the top and the bottom, and that those relationships are, based on this principle here. And so when we draw from life, I'll say to a student, well, use your skills in measuring visually to measure the curve of that oval. And what we do is we use straight angles that are measurable to find the curve of an oval. And when we do that, that's completely related to this. Okay. Okay, quick break. And while y'all have a quick break, I'm going to be changing to the easel and setting up the iPad so you can see my paper and my pencil. While you are having your quick break, please grab some type of pen. Okay. So it'll take me about 10 minutes to set up. Okie dokie. Okay, cool. I don't know if it's harder to have fewer students and wait for that response, or to have lots of students who don't respond. I like this, I've actually worked at schools before where my class sizes have been 4 students, and I do miss it. But of course that wasn't on Zoom, but I really appreciate y'all still coming to the class, and I like that you are being consistent with it. So I really appreciate it. This would be super hard if it was just me talking to myself. So 10 minutes, okay? So go ahead and grab another piece of paper, sketchbook paper, printer paper, notebook paper. Okay, and for this, we're going to use pencil and we're going to use pen. Okay. All right. And so I'm going to use, you're going to need to use a pen for your homework. And it could be like a drawing pen, like a Micron, if you have had, any type of kit from any class that has a drawing pen in it. A ballpoint pen will work too. You do have to use a black pen. That's one thing. I actually really like these, this is a Sharpie S-Gel. And this is a great pen. It's really nice for drawing. But ballpoint pen, like a rolling ballpoint pen, you can do beautiful drawings with ballpoint pen. You just need to be aware that if you are a person who puts their hand on the paper, that you will make a very messy drawing. So sometimes it's worth it to go, even somewhere like Office Depot, they sell drawing pens there. And it's worth it to get a drawing pen that will dry pretty quickly, so that if you are someone that draws with their hand on the page, you don't end up smudging your drawing, which is always annoying. So what I want us to do first is I just want us to start off by drawing, and I'm using a 7B so you can see it really well. Let's just go ahead and start off by drawing 10 equal size little squares. Don't use your ruler to draw the squares. Practice just drawing them. by hand. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. Okay. So there's lots of different systems of tracking value in terms of like giving values like a numerical amount. The one I generally teach is Munsell. And I generally teach Munsell because not only does Munsell kind of like correlate to like painting or color design, but also computer color systems are based off Munsell. So in the Munsell system, there's basically like this rod. It's an axis, and it's broken up. Originally, it was broken up into 10 sections. I don't know how many that is. I'm not really counting. And the 10 sort of sections there correlated to values. So the center axis of the Munsell chart are the values. Now, Munsell got really over the idea that color could be fit within a symmetrical sphere or chart. He really saw that color was not symmetrical, that different colors changed at different rates in terms of like their saturation. And so he came up with this chart that was a little bit different. In the center is the value axis. And so originally there were 10. So say down here at the bottom is darkness, like black. And it gets up here and it gets lighter and lighter until it goes to white. Okay. Well, then around the central axis are these like almost like pieces of a pie. Okay, and each piece of a pie is a color. And each color desaturates to the value that is the pie is attached to at different rates based on the color itself. Okay, so say this out here is a very highly chromatic yellow, and say this is value number 5, then that highly chromatic yellow may take 6 segments to desaturate to get to the value here. But say this out here is like kind of like a lilac. Well, that may take less sections to desaturate to that value. So each color desaturates at different rates. And each color has 3 elements to it. It has its hue, which is basically hue just means the name of the color. It has its chroma, which is the chromatic saturation, like how much color is in the color. And then it has its value. Okay, so Munsell comes up with this chart, and basically this chart looks kind of like an oval that's been skewed one direction rather than a perfectly circular color sphere, which is what he didn't believe in. Hue, chroma, value was changed when we went digital to HSL, hue, saturation, and light. Okay, so like if I open up my sketchbook here, and I click on here, HSL. And so at the top is the hues. So those hues go around that outside circle. Do you see? Those are all the different colors that are possible as sort of like pure color. The saturation is here. We can see it's removing the quantity of chroma. And then the light is changing. It's perhaps I'm not on a very good color to pick from. It's grayness, do you see? So here, like if I put this at 50 or close to, because I'm using my fingers, and the light is at 50, the saturation is at 50, we can see that the circle is in the center of that diamond. But if I remove light, it goes towards black. And then if I remove saturation, it goes even more towards pure black, you see. So HSL is based on the system designed by Munsell. Now, Munsell teaches us that every color has 3 components. One of the most important components is the value. So when I teach painting, it's really hard to teach students who haven't had drawing yet how to see color, because you have to understand value to see color. You can't just see color itself. You have to understand the way that the value exists within the color. You have to be able to look through color to see value. Okay, so a bit of complicated color theory there for you. And then I always add it because I just can't not add it. What you were taught about color, that red, yellow, and blue are primary colors because they cannot be mixed, is completely false and not based on science. If I want to mix red, I can. If I want to mix blue, I can. The only color I can't mix is yellow. And so this is why with your printer at home, your inkjet printer, you don't put in a red cartridge and a yellow cartridge and a blue cartridge, especially because red and blue don't make purple. They make kind of like a muddy brown typically. So instead we use CMYK, and CMYK is linked to red, green, and blue, which are the colors that you see in terms of like wavelengths and particles. CMYK functions like this becomes primary, and primaries are mixed to make secondaries, which is red, yellow, blue. So if I mix cyan and magenta, I make blue. If I mix magenta and yellow, I make red. And then yellow just stays yellow. So this is based on like science. This is based on tradition. I never understood as a kid why when I mixed red and blue together, I never got purple. And then I took painting in college and like, well, you have to have ultramarine blue and you have to have cad red deep. And it's like, well, then they're not primary red and primary blue, right? They're just like variations of blue that are closer to purple. So when I mix it together with a red that's closer to purple, I make purple. But if I take a primary magenta and a primary cyan and I squeeze them out and mix them together, I'll always make, blue. And if I, work with magenta and I add red to it, or add blue to it, then I can easily make purple. So this is more scientifically based. Anyway, every professor I work with thinks I'm silly to teach that, but I teach printmaking, which by the way, I'm teaching in the spring and it will be on campus. And so we use CMYK in printmaking because you can make every single color you need from CMYK. All right, so we're going to look at it this way. We're going to look at value this way. We're going to say that the first box is going to be pure white, okay? And so we're going to say that that one is 0, that it has no value. And then for black, we're going to say 10. Now we could also switch these. We could say, well, white is 10 because you layer light to make white. But what we're doing is we're actually using a material. And so the more material we put down, the more layers of value we put down, the darker it gets. So then just count to the middle, 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. I always do that wrong. Sorry, this is 9. 0. So then 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So 5 is going to be middle gray. I don't know how many times I've done this. I've never done it numerically correct. So here I'm just going to put down a value that's as dark as I can make it. And I want y'all to do this. As dark as you can make it with your pencil. Don't smudge it with your finger. Okay. Now, in the number 5, we're going to put in a value that is in between white and black. And I'm actually going to guess that by my pressure, like how much pressure did it take me to make something black? Now here, I'm going to put down in the one box and put down the lightest possible value I can make. So the value of something is its relative lightness or darkness. Okay. So when we look at value, we're thinking about like how light or how dark something is. So now what we do is like we have 5 and we have 9, and in between we have 7. So I'm going to squint my eyes, and this is a key component of this, is squinting my eyes so that I can put in what I think is a value in between 5 and 9. Now, why do you squint your eyes? Well, first of all, it's not because I think that like, you know, that it makes things more solid. I mean, I guess in the way it does. But what it does is it activates the rods in your eye. So in your eye, you have cones and you have rods. The cones see color, the rods see value, and the rods activate more in the dark. And so when you squint your eyes, you're limiting the quantity of light that's coming into your eye and activating those rods. And it kind of helps you to see the value better. Now squint your eyes again and do number 8. So I'm going to look at that value and that value, and I'm going to draw in a value that I think is in between those. And the squinting your eyes thing, you know, like when we do it in the classroom, nobody wants to do it, right? Because like everyone thinks that they're going to look silly. And it's like, well, if everyone's doing it, you can't look silly. And students will say to me, like, how do I learn to see value better? I'm like, squint your eyes, you know, and they're like, oh, I don't know. And then they do it and they're like, oh, it does help a lot. And it's not, it's just like because your eye has rods and cones in it, and the rods activate, and it makes it easier to see the value. And I think sometimes it's hard to convince students of that. Now you can do the same thing between the 5 and the 7. Now the other thing you have up your sleeve is the pressure. How much pressure does it take you to put in the value when your pencil? Then just go do the other thing down the other end. 5 and 1. Okay. So 5 and 1, what's in between that? 3 and 1, what's in between that? 3 and 5, what's in between that? And then our hope is that when we look at that across, that we're able to see a gradual progression of value. Okay. So when you're done with your first value scale, go ahead and put a second one below it with your pen. Now, I'm actually going to move my easel up a little bit so it's easier for me to stand here. So now, same kind of process. Go ahead and put in your black. So a good trick here is cross hatching, like going in different directions. It doesn't have to be perfect right now for your nodes. It's just a little practice. You're going to do some practice for your homework. And so like what I'm going to do is compare this to this. And so for 5, I'm going to compare that to that. So when you're using lines, like the way I just used that line there, the more lines there are, the darker it's going to be. The less lines there are, the lighter it's going to be. So what's happening there is the black ink versus the white paper, and the way that your brain is reading the quantity of blackness to whiteness. So here, I might not do cross hatching. I used it in the black because I really wanted to have a way to make it pure black. But from now on, I'm just going to use directional line, which is just line all going in one direction. And so then I'm going to go and I'm just going to compare each time by squinting my eyes. And when I squint my eyes at this square, I want to make sure it matches this square. Okay, sorry, you can see my nose there. Sorry about that. It's the same thing here. Now here again with the number 8, you're going to have to really close off that white space. But you don't want to close it off so much that it's closed off as much in the black. Same thing down here. This should have very few lines in it. Whoa, sorry, my iPad just slipped out of the tripod. That's scary. Always scary when it happens. See how few lines there are there in that number 1 I just made? Now, when I got here, I'm like, oh, that 4 I just made, my 5 is lighter, so then I need to go in and put some more darkness in there. And when I squint my eyes again, I'm looking for a small gradual gradation between my values. Let's go ahead and do that for a second. Then when you're ready, you could just give me some emotive signals. So I know it's okay to start the next part. And also, if you're not done, we don't want to lose our whole class to doing this. You can always go back and do it again. You're also going to do something like this for your homework. Okay, are you ready? Okay. Great. So then if you're not done, you can come back to do this, in a little bit. As long as you have the understanding right now, that's great. What I want you to do now is go ahead and draw a boundary box. And let's find the center of the boundary box, vertical and horizontal axis like we've been doing. Just nice and lightly. Okay. So down here in the left quadrant, okay, just go ahead and draw a circle as best as you can. Don't worry about it being perfect, just a circle. Okay, so we're going to talk real quick about light logic. So light logic is the logical way that light progresses through a space. Okay, so you'll see all the time in your homeworks when you draw from life, we're going to say light this with a single source. That is supposed to make your life easier. The more light sources, the harder it is. Okay, so if we're going to light our space with a light from the top right hand corner here. So we're going to put like a little reminder that the light's coming from here. If light's coming from the right like that, that means that we're going to have a shadow and it's going to go to the left. So go ahead and put in a shadow. It should be like half a sphere shape. You don't need to bring your value right up to the actual sphere though, because there's going to be some light that's bouncing around down there, and it's going to create what we call reflected light. So go ahead and just at the top here, we're just gonna leave that area up there light, like a 0. And then I just want you to cover the rest of the space here with a value that's like a 1. Okay, now we're gonna have another curve here. And from there on, we're just gonna put in another value in there that's like a 2 or 3. And then we're going to have another curve here. So I don't want to draw my curves too deep, too dark, because I don't want them to mess up my values. But we're not going to add any more value here on the outside edge of the sphere, and we're not going to add any value here inside the cast shadow. That's going to be the reflected light, which is the light that's bouncing off of the sphere onto the surface and back from the surface onto the sphere. However, at the very bottom of the sphere where it's touching the table, we're going to put in a really dark little line. It's not a line, it's really just like a shadow. And then inside the section here that we did, we're going to put another layer of darkness on top of that. Like so. And then we're going to divide that space kind of in half like that. And we're going to put another layer of darkness on top of that. So what's happening here is that light is hitting the top of the sphere. It's going to do two things. It's going to travel over the sphere. There we go. That's a bit better. It's going to travel over the sphere. It's also going to travel around the sphere. Okay, and as it travels around the sphere, it's going to come around here. So the outside edge here will actually be lighter than this part. And then that light will then bounce from there onto there. And so the basic elements of the light on the sphere, if I draw the sphere here, is the cast shadow is easy to remember. So put the cast shadow in. There we go. I'm drawing on a big pad, so I keep forgetting how much of the camera isn't capturing. So then up here is like the highlight area, which is the brightest part. And then we can just go ahead and put in our light like that. And then we have our midtones. Again, we're not going to take it to the edge here. And then we have our shadow, with the darkest part of our shadow being the core of the shadow. And then we have a little bit of darkness again, and then the reflected light. And then here we have reflected light. And then we have cast shadow. As we get further into value, I'll give you like my lecture, which talks about like the art history and like all that kind of stuff, like what the Impressionists did that pissed off everybody, and like how they really saw things the right way. So it's pretty easy to draw a sphere with basic values. Let's go ahead and let's just here. Let's build real quick some type of rectangle in perspective. So now our light logic is coming from the top right. It's coming down and it's hitting the top of the rectangle. So we're not really going to worry about the value on the top of the rectangle. On this side, go ahead and we're gonna put in a value, and I'm gonna put in about like a 3 right here on the edge, which is further away from the light. And then as it gets closer to the light, I'm gonna lift off my pencil and adjust that to about like a 2. Maybe actually, pardon me, this is more like a 7, and I'll adjust it to a 5. Now our light logic is coming from here, so it's gonna create a cast shadow, maybe something like that. So we're gonna put in our cast shadow. Again, remember back that reflected light that's in there. And that dark shadow line where the rectangle is sitting on the surface, like so. Now this will only really reflect if it's some type of reflected thing, like a white painted cube, or like a glassine box or something like that. But sometimes even if this was a purely black box, if the light was set up the right way, you'd get a little bit of reflection. Now this side over here is going to be darker than the plane facing us because it's getting less light. But it's going to be most dark at the bottom. And then come up. So just like over here, it's most dark on the corner and then getting lighter as it gets further away from the corner, closer to the light source. Here, the top of this edge, this plane, is taller and closer to the light source. And the bottom is further away, so it's going to get darker. And that means probably that this corner here would be darker as well. Okay. All right. So let's go ahead and down here, draw another boundary box or somewhere else on your paper, or grab another piece of paper. Find the center. Find the vanishing point. And then lightly mimic that rectangle you made there with the pencil. Okay, but don't fill in the values. Now take your pen. Okay. And we're going to mimic the values we made here, but with the pen down here. So first of all, this plane is moving to the left. So that tells me that I think I need to have some lines that are moving towards the left with the surface of the plane that the shadow is on. This plane here is very vertical, so I'm going to put some values in there. And then this side's vertical too, so I'm going to put some values in there like that. The shadow line, we can follow that bottom edge. Now we have this gradation of light that we did, which we could mimic by putting cross hatching here. And as it gets up closer to the top right-hand corner, decreasing the quantity of the lines that we lay down. Now over here, our cross-hatching would be perhaps a little bit more like orthogonals heading towards that vanishing point. And then perhaps if there was an area we wanted to make really dark, we could cross-hatch. Yeah. Now what's cool is like if I had another rectangle here, and I actually wanted to make it look less dimensional, more flat, I could actually do all of my value-based line in the same direction. Sorry. And it would actually kind of like flatten out the form rather than make it look more dimensional. A big part of understanding how value exists is that remembering that if you have a value, it's the values that surround it that help the value to be readable. So a really big thing that's important about value is that all value is relative. So by that, I mean like, if I have a line, if I have a square, oh, okay. And in the center of the square, I put a dark circle that's really dark. The circle looks like really, really dark, right? However, if I surround the circle with darkness, it's no longer as dark. And in fact, if I just completely make the space around the circle as dark as the circle disappears. So all value is relative. Okay, so now here's a square, here's a triangle. This is the value of the triangle. Okay, and then around the triangle, I place a lighter value. Well, now the triangle looks darker than the background. But if I put, yep, sorry, brain working. If I put a darker value back there, now the triangle looks lighter than the background. You see, so all value is relative. So the values that are surrounding your forms help your forms to be read as the value you want them to be. So we're going to be, I'm going to challenge you with this next assignment. And I'm hoping that that challenge is something which is like fun and exciting. So let me stop sharing this. I'm going to go to our assignments here. Okay. So your next assignment is this Edward Gorey perspective. Now, some of this is a bit more than we've been doing, and some of it is right on schedule for what we've been doing. And so, you know, as an instructor, I want to challenge you, but I'm also hoping that we have enough of a understanding right now where we are, that this is going to be successful. Okay, I haven't done this for a little while, this project, but it's one of my favorites to do. Okay, so Simon, can you see the handout? Can you just give me an emoji? Cool. Okay. So Edward Gorey, they say the person who killed Edward Gorey in terms of like cultural significance was Lemony Snicket. Okay. But I don't think Edward Gorey has been killed in terms of cultural significance, but he was an American illustrator. Okay. And he was really well known for these kind of Victorian Gothic illustrations that used a hyper stylized illustrative method that was centered on Victorian practices and Victorian imagery. Edward Gorey is someone that I learned about because of there is a show on PBS called Mystery. It's still on now, I think, and he illustrated the beginning of that. And as a kid, I always thought there was going to be like a really cool cartoon that was about to come on, but it was like this, like, you know, Miss Marple or something, which today I enjoy, but when I was a kid, I thought was incredibly boring. So we can see he's using like a hyper stylized way of drawing, and he's using sort of cross hatching and different types of applications of value with a pen to create interesting values and things. Edward Gorey books always rhyme. So when I made this packet for you, I created it with all these rhymes through it. So I hope that you enjoy my rhymes. This is one of the most complicated packets I've made. It took me a long time to come up with all of my rhymes, so I hope that you enjoy them. So when we look at Edward Gorey, I'm going to ask you to read a little bit of the intro that I have here about him. One of the things that I find really fascinating about him is like his utilization of Victorian imagery. So I'm actually personally really interested in the Victorian era. You know, in my art, I use a lot of hair, and I'm really fascinated with hair. And I often like weave it and braid it into projects. In June, I'll be doing this performance that I've done a couple times called Safety in Numbers, where we invite people into a space and we cut their hair and we make clones of me in a way to show solidarity with the trans community. And I just use a lot of hair, and the Victorians used tons of hair. So they would make hair weavings and hair pictures. And we can see that they also had a way in which they would utilize certain types of imagery. So the imagery you're going to see in a lot of Victorian work, whether it's with hair or without hair. And they would do hair embroideries, by the way, and they would do hair sculptures, especially with deceased people from their life, as well as hair bracelets and hair jewelry from, you know, loved ones who had died. So imagery that you're going to see from the Victorian works that you're going to see in the Edward Gorey works are the urns, the weeping willows, and these kind of like really tall figures. Now, the Victorian period, right, is named after Queen Victoria. And Queen Victoria was considered to be the style fashion icon of her day. So whatever Queen Victoria did, everybody else had to do if they were going to be fashionable. At the period of time during the Victorian era, it wasn't uncommon for someone to wear all black during a mourning period. And typically the mourning period would last about 2 years. And, you know, when my dad passed and I had to fly home to Florida, I really started to understand the symbolism of a color that you may be wearing to tell other people that you are in mourning, because I found it very difficult to like communicate to like, you know, the airline desk person that I didn't want to argue about my seat because I was so upset and in mourning. And the Victorians kind of had this system where like, if you were in mourning, you would wear black for 2 years. Well, when Queen Victoria was in power and King Edward, I think it was, maybe it was King George, one of them, King Edward. When Edward died, she was in mourning for like the rest of her life. And so Victorian women were like really stuck with this problem of like, okay, so the queen is only wearing black for the rest of her life, but boy, is black kind of like, we're kind of over black. So they started to come up with different colors for mourning periods. So they would wear black at first, and then they would go to like purple, and then they would go to this like beautiful, gorgeous electric blue. Which, and by the time they got to electric blue, you know, they were basically not in mourning anymore. But the respectability during the Victorian time was a very important part of culture. And men were allowed to wear whatever kind of material they wanted during mourning. What usually it would be cotton, but women were expected to wear the most uncomfortable fabrics possible as a way to symbolize their mourning. You know, so they weren't supposed to be comfortable. So that's probably why the Victorian women always look so sad in all of the art from the period, in my opinion. So we're going to be looking at creating a perspective drawing based on the style of Edward Gorey. Now, you've actually already got your perspective. You just recreated the perspective that you chose was your best perspective, and you had to recreate it with a ruler to fix it, to make it right. And so that's actually the perspective you're going to use for this drawing. You can see that one of the things about Edward Gorey's drawings is that they're highly textural. So pattern is a way of creating texture. If you've taken design with me, you've learned the difference between formal and informal patterns. And pattern is a great way to make something visually stimulating. Now, it could be pattern as in like these wallpapers, which have a pattern that are drawn in, or it could be like the pattern created by lines. So like here on this wall, there's no pattern, but there is a repetition that's occurring with the line work that feels very much like a repeating pattern. So like, you know, when I look at this drawing, which is a very simple drawing, it's 2 pieces of paper or cloth floating in the air. You know, it's not the cloth floating in the air by itself that's so emotional or charged. It's the darkness around the cloth. And then, of course, the psychological element of cloth floating by itself, like how is it floating by itself? So here we have this really, in terms of subject matter, kind of a simple drawing. In terms of visual stimulation, it's quite complex. We have the horizontal lines of the floor, and then that is balanced against the horizontal directional lines of the baseboards. And then that's balanced against the cross-hatching of the walls. And then the very soft indications of value within the cloth fabric. So you can use, I tell you here, we have connected lines or broken lines that can be used. And so we can actually see that like Gorey uses more connected line when things get denser and darker, and broken line when things need to just be symbolically hinted at, like cloth folds. So inside this packet that I have for you are some drawings that I made for you to fill in to learn about like the use of line in space. So here on this first one, I'm asking you to take your pen and to follow the arrows to create directional lines that follow the directions of the arrows to create a dimensional space. Now in the next one, I actually limit the quantity of direction that I ask you to go, so you can explore what happens when you want to flatten space. And so when we look at some of the gory drawings, for instance, like this space is extremely flat, but yet there's a hint at dimensionality, but yet it also reads as flat. And so there's a playfulness that can happen here. So this page, page 5 and page 6, you're actually going to print them out and do the work and submit it under the other assignment that's called Edward Gorey handout. So just the 2 pages. And if you don't have a printer, you can also do these digitally with a black, like a black line and a stylus. I'll accept that as well. And so you submit that to the Edward Gorey handout page. So this is about value, right? This is about direction of line. So you have to do those 2 pages. One of the reasons why I've always liked to do this with my students, is that one of the things about Edward Gorey is that sometimes his perspective isn't perfect, but the drawing is so stylized that we don't really see it. So this is actually a drawing from my former TA and a former student who I'm still in contact with, and she sometimes comes and works in my personal studio on projects for me. And I asked them to do an example, and this is the one that they did, and I just have always really liked it. So certain things that Edward Gorey incorporates are these like ghostly Victorian figures. Gorey incorporates a lot of bats, and Gorey incorporates a lot of like portraits. And so for some of you, you may feel very comfortable only like tackling the space, like maybe that's enough for you. And for some more of you, you may want to get a bit more imaginative. Now, if you want to get a bit more imaginative, like Seraphim did here, then what you would do would be to make sure that the elements that you incorporate are going to sit in that perspective, the way that you drew the perspective. So like the figures, the portraits on the wall, those are all sitting within the perspective in such a way that it's successful. So you're going to go through and really make sure that you understand the project. Go online and research Edward Gorey further so you can find more about his style. I will tell you right now that some of the best tricks to doing this well are in researching Gorey's style and seeing how he created spaces and how he created these illustrations. There's a lot of tricks in there, and those tricks might be your best friend. So don't overlook going and researching Gorey some more. So you've already done step 1 and 2. You've created the corrected version of the Edward Gorey drawing, of the perspective drawing that was your favorite from the interior perspectives that you did. Now, if your version that you corrected, like if you did it on a piece of paper that was crumpled or a piece of paper that was folded, or you drew too dark, then what I want you to do is take that drawing that you did and tape it to a window, and then take a new piece of 14x11 paper and tape that new piece of paper on top of the other paper and lightly trace the drawing. I actually kind of suggest that you all do that because it gives you another chance to fix the space again. Some of you may have light tables, you can use that. If you have a glass table, you can actually like put your drawings on the glass table and put your new piece of paper on top of the drawing you've made and shine a flashlight underneath, and that becomes a light box. But the window is always the easiest thing to do if you know, and it's free if you already have the window. So basically what I want is, perhaps you recreated your drawing and it was so good and so clean that you don't need to change, you don't need to make another version. Fine. But if it wasn't so good, it wasn't so clean, there were some problems that I told you about, or I drew on your drawing in the submissions that you made, then I would recreate it again to make sure it's all right. You want to use a ruler and really use that to correct your perspective. And then once you're ready, using Edward Gorey's drawings as inspiration, you're going to start to think about adding your lines and your textures. You need to use a black pen. It can be a black ballpoint pen. It can be a black fountain pen. It can be a drawing pen, whatever. It doesn't matter to me as long as you don't smudge it while you're playing it. Your drawing that you create must include at least 3 bats. Okay. Now, I'm bummed because I went through and corrected all the PDF earlier and I missed this. We have not done letters in 2-point perspective yet, John. Okay. So your drawing must include a line of text that includes a capital letter drawn in 1-point perspective. That's what we'll have to go and change that to. Sorry, it says 2-point perspective. We haven't done that yet. And the room that you should be doing should already be 1-point perspective, because for your interior spaces, you only did 1-point perspectives. I'm sorry, I went through today earlier and corrected all of the bits and bobs that weren't going to apply, and I missed that right there, and I apologize for that. So I need you to include a line of text. It should rhyme because that's kind of like the Edward Gorey style. And it should have a 1-point letter in perspective. And then you're going to document it really well and turn it in. So here are your requirements. Okay. And then I also included for you a whole handout about different types of textures that you can create with pen down here. And I also gave you some pictures of bats that you can draw. Now I want to show you real quick. I have you for just a few more minutes. I want to show you what students have done with this. So here is a student's corrected drawing. I tell you right here, it's just a little bit different because they did it in class, like on, like landed class with me. So they had a little bit of a difference, but you can see here that this is the drawing that they created. And then they went through and corrected their drawing. And that was their finished piece. So we can see there are 3 bats. They've got more than 3 bats. And here's their rhyme up here with their letters in perspective. And so it's a really imaginative adaptation of the space that they were looking at. Okay. This is another one. Now, Sasha has gone on to be a really great printmaker. And I actually brought some etchings from her that are in my kitchen. She graduated UW with a degree in interdisciplinary visual arts. So look at the floor. It's very flat looking because the cross hatching creates like a sense of flatness. It doesn't read like perspective. And it looks pretty different versus like the flatness established in the bed here. It's cool how she came up with the idea that her bats could be immobile rather than real life bats. As another student, the monster under the bed is always a cool element to this. B is for beasts of all kinds living in and out of confines. And so we can imagine that the beast has left its little cage. And then you can be as imaginative as you want to with how the bats get included. Now this drawing the student did, I made her keep working on this for about 2 extra weeks because I wasn't happy with it. And we kept adding and kept adding. And in the end, we made a really cool drawing. So sometimes a drawing takes a lot, it takes a lot to get it right. And so with this drawing, we really had to work on it to get it to the point where it was really functioning well. If you stick with me, if you have patience with me, I will keep pushing you and it will be good. If you don't have patience with me, if you rush it when I say go back and do this, it's not going to get to that point where it could possibly get to if you just kind of gave me the chance to help you. This student, this was the best drawing they made all quarter. And they really kind of went to town here and made this. It really sort of complicated space work. The perspective here, y'all, is not perfect, but it's functioning at a good rate because they were able to be creative and also be diligent about how they applied these values. This one I was like, it seems like I'm always en route because of the long commute. That's the inside of the bus they took every day. This one is a good example. It's not one of the ones that like I'm super excited by. Everything in it is functioning well, but it's just so cold to me. And it reads like, sometimes students get angry at me if you're in interior design, but it's a bit too interior designy for me. Like it feels a bit too void of contrast and void of that sort of like Edward Gorey, scary, spooky elements. This one also by a student that was an interior designer, it has that same type of feeling to it, but I actually think it's more successful. Obviously it's the inside of a Starbucks with like these ghosts. But I think they were really successful and a bit more playful, like there's a little bats over here in the pastry case. And then the track lighting are bats. And I just think it's a bit more fun. This student disappeared off my map. I wish I knew where they were, but they were a really great student and really sarcastic, dry wit. And I got to know their mom. And their mom and I would like complain about how sarcastic and dry their kid was. And it was great fun, but really good drawing that they made. And really inventive in here. Broke the rule by doing a 2-point perspective. The student broke every rule I ever gave them. Remember, it should be a 1-point perspective because we haven't studied 2-point perspective yet. So that's your goal. Lots of great examples to look at there. Now your C again, you've got 2 assignments. Okay, the first one is super easy. It's just going to be the Edward Gorey handout, which is just the 2 pages from the handout that I just covered. So I can actually even like go in and I'll do this a second, go in and hyperlink that for you so you know that the handout I'm referring to is in the drawing itself, which is this drawing here. And it has the Edward Gorey perspective 4. That's the handout that has the 2 pages in it you have to do. Okay, now this is due on the 10th, which means that you have a week from today to do it. So I want to sort of like just state and kind of like implore you to think about the fact that I've given you a week. So I'm expecting a lot. And also I'm expecting that if you're struggling, that you're going to ask me for an office visit and say, hey, I'm struggling with this project. Can I meet with you real quick to talk about what's happening? Okay. So there's not, in my opinion, there's not an excuse for not being able to complete this project. Because I'm telling you right now that if you've got a week from now to do this, and if you are struggling, all you have to do is reach out to me and ask me for help. And if you can't meet me during my office hours, which are in the syllabus, then I will make other arrangements with you, or simply just say, send me a photograph of what you've got and I'll correct it and send it back. Okay. So a lot covered today, and a lot of new ideas, a big project for your prospective portfolio, and some new tools thrown in there too with the pen. So reach out if you have questions and need some help.